Captain Elena Varga was a name whispered with doubt, a pilot whose clearance was treated as a joke. But when the valley erupted in fire and the general's convoy was pinned, her Black Hawk roared into legend. If you love stories of the underestimated rising to glory, make sure to hit like and subscribe, because this is just the beginning of Elena Varga's legend. The morning sun spilled across the tarmac, glinting off the sleek frames of the UH-60 Black Hawks lined in formation. Captain Elena Varga walked steadily toward them, helmet tucked under her arm, the weight of new responsibility pressing at her shoulders. Her boots struck the concrete with sharp precision, each step echoing her determination. Yet, the whispers trailed behind her like shadows. "Quota filling," one pilot muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Command just needed another box ticked. Elena's jaw tightened, though she kept her expression steady. She had heard it all before, murmurs about politics, favoritism, anything but skill. The irony was bitter. She had logged endless hours in training simulators, mastered emergency maneuvers that even her instructors found challenging. But here, on the flight line where reputations were forged, none of that seemed to matter. She paused at the edge of the row, running her hand lightly along the metal skin of her assigned helicopter. The Black Hawk loomed powerful, a machine demanding both respect and trust. Elena exhaled slowly, centering herself. To her, flying wasn't about politics or perception. It was about precision, discipline, and survival. "Varga," a voice called out. Sergeant Cole Brenner, tall, confident, and perpetually smirking, approached with his helmet dangling from one hand. He didn't lower his voice for the others. "Hope the general's not riding with you anytime soon. Wouldn't want his last view of the world to be your shaky landing." Laughter rippled through the nearby crew. Elena didn't flinch. She met his eyes, calm and unwavering. "Funny," she said evenly. "I don't remember seeing your name at the top of the simulator scores." The smirk faltered, though only for a breath. "Simulators don't bleed, Captain. Let's see what you're worth when the blades start turning." He turned away, leaving the sting of his words hanging in the air. Around them, maintenance crews checked systems, pilots prepped gear, and the constant drone of rotors warming up filled the base. Elena climbed into her Black Hawk, strapping herself in with practiced efficiency. She went through her checklist, methodical and exact. Every switch, every dial was a ritual that steadied her heartbeat. Across the line, a figure watched without comment. General Marcus Harlow stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. The silver in his hair caught the sun, his uniform immaculate. He didn't speak, didn't correct the laughter, didn't offer support. He simply observed. Elena felt his gaze but refused to let it shake her. If anything, it fueled her resolve. She tightened her grip on the cyclic, eyes forward. Her clearance wasn't charity, no matter what the others thought. She had earned her place here. The engines roared to life, rotor blades chopping the air in rhythmic thunder. Elena adjusted her headset, focused on the instruments. The whispers, the jokes, the silent judgment, they would all fade once she was airborne. Up there, it was only pilot, machine, and sky. And in that space, doubt had no place to breathe. The rotors still echoed in Elena's ears as she stepped down from the Black Hawk. The laughter from earlier clung to her thoughts, but she buried it deep, channeling the sting into focus. Training was meant to prove what she could do. The others could whisper all they wanted. When the exercises began, the truth would surface. The proving ground was a stretch of rugged terrain carved into hills and gullies, designed to mimic unpredictable combat zones. Pilots were evaluated on speed, maneuvering, and adaptability under simulated fire. For most, it was a chance to show off. For Elena, it was the first step toward erasing doubt. Major Daniel Ruiz, her commanding officer, stood near the control station, his clipboard balanced against one arm. His sharp eyes scanned the field as crews prepared the helicopters. "You'll run third in rotation," he told Elena without looking up. His tone was clipped, businesslike. "Precision's good, but don't crawl through the course. Combat doesn't wait for perfection." Elena gave a small nod. "Understood, sir." When her turn came, she slid into the cockpit, hands moving with calm certainty. Systems check, gauges steady, controls responding, everything in order. She lifted smoothly into the air, the Black Hawk rising like an extension of her own body. The course began with a rapid ascent over jagged ridges, followed by a sharp drop into a narrow valley. Elena traced every contour with care, eyes sweeping instruments and horizon alike. Her flying was steady, deliberate, almost graceful in its exactness. She weaved through simulated anti-air fire, countered with evasive turns, and emerged from each maneuver intact. On the ground, Brenner snorted. She's flying like it's a parade. At this rate, the enemy would have had time to set up a picnic before she passed. A few chuckles followed, though Ruiz's face remained unreadable. Elena pushed on, undistracted. She guided the Black Hawk through the final obstacle, a tight turn followed by a precision hover above a mock extraction zone. Her descent was perfect, touching down with barely a tremor. Instruments confirmed a flawless run, no errors, no near misses. She powered down, heart steady. When she climbed out, she caught the looks from a few technicians. Some nodded with quiet respect, though most of her peers shook their heads dismissively. Ruiz approached, clipboard tucked under his arm. Clean. Precise. But you're too slow, Varga. His voice carried no anger, only concern sharpened by doubt. Out there, you won't have the luxury of taking your time. Under pressure, hesitation kills. Elena met his gaze. I wasn't hesitating, sir. I was ensuring control. He studied her a moment longer, then simply turned away. From behind, a softer voice broke the silence. Lieutenant Mara Steele, carrying a folder of intel reports, offered Elena a small smile. Don't let them get in your head. You fly like no one else here. You'll get your moment. Just wait. Elena's lips curved faintly. She didn't know when that moment would come, but she believed it would. The days that followed were filled with repetition, simulations, drills, and evaluations that seemed endless. Elena carried herself with the same calm precision each time, never cracking under the weight of judgment, never snapping back at Brenner's barbed remarks. Still, she knew whispers only harden with repetition. Her skill was acknowledged, but not respected. Then, a briefing notice swept across the base. Word spread quickly, insurgent activity had been detected in Red Serpent Valley, a rugged stretch of hostile terrain known for ambushes and vanishing enemies. Intel suggested that Spectre units were regrouping there, perhaps preparing for something larger. In the operations room, maps stretched across the table, markers scattered over the winding canyons. Officers gathered, voices low but urgent. General Marcus Harlow stood at the head, his presence commanding silence without a word. He studied the terrain with narrowed eyes. We don't rely on assumptions, Harlow said firmly. I want eyes in that valley. Nothing substitutes for seeing the ground ourselves. His tone was resolute, the kind that left no room for debate. I'll lead the reconnaissance. A murmur rippled through the room. The general rarely exposed himself to direct risk, but his insistence carried finality. Major Ruiz shifted uncomfortably before speaking. Sir, with respect, that's hostile territory. We can deploy unmanned assets or send a secondary unit. Harlow's gaze sharpened. Spectre knows how to fool satellites and drones. I want a manned squadron. I'll not sit behind a desk while my men take the risks. That settled the matter. Orders were drafted, pilots assigned. Brenner's name appeared at the top of the roster, as expected. His experience and confidence made him the natural lead. Ruiz's pen hovered briefly before scrawling another name further down, Captain Elena Varga. She saw it posted later that evening, her own designation neatly printed under backup pilot. The comment beside it was clear, for contingency use only. When Brenner spotted her name, his laughter carried across the hangar. Backup? More like ballast. Let's hope she doesn't get a chance to touch the controls, or we'll be the ones needing rescue. Elena ignored him, though her pulse quickened. She knew what backup meant. She wasn't being trusted with the mission. She was being tolerated, a safety net in case of equipment failure or injury. Later, as crews checked equipment and flight plans, Mara Steele found Elena by the row of helicopters, studying her own machine. I know what they're saying, Mara said quietly, her tone almost conspiratorial. But the general didn't dismiss you. He let you in. That's more than most expected. Elena nodded faintly, fingers brushing the cool metal of the Black Hawk's fuselage. Just in case, she murmured, echoing the phrase from the roster. Her stomach tightened, but she straightened her shoulders. It didn't matter how reluctant the assignment was. She was going into the valley with the squadron. That was enough, for now. Engines thundered across the airfield as the squadron prepared for departure. Crews moved briskly, securing last-minute checks, shouting over the rising roar of rotors. Elena sat in her cockpit, headset snug against her ears, hands steady on the controls. Though she had flown countless training sorties, this felt different. This was no simulator. Red Serpent Valley loomed ahead, unpredictable and dangerous. The order crackled through the comms. All units, clear for takeoff. Brenner's Black Hawk surged first into the sky, blades slicing the air with confident force. One by one, the others followed, climbing into formation. Elena eased her helicopter upward, smooth and measured, falling into position behind the others. The sensation of weight dropping away as the skids left the ground was familiar, but her chest tightened all the same. The squadron pushed southward, cutting through the crisp blue sky. Below, the land unfurled in rugged ridges and deep gullies, the kind of terrain that could conceal anything, or anyone. To Elena, every shadow was worth studying. Her eyes scanned constantly, marking rock patterns, the shifting colors of sand, the line of the river carving through stone. "Try to keep up, rookie," Brenner's voice drawled over the radio, laced with smugness. His helicopter banked aggressively to the left, showing off a maneuver that wasn't needed. Laughter from his co-pilot echoed faintly over the channel. Elena pressed her lips together, ignoring the jab. She steadied her craft, holding formation with calm precision. Her focus remained on the landscape, not the chatter. If there was trouble waiting in those valleys, it would reveal itself to those who bothered to look. From the lead chopper, Brenner's movements grew flashier. He skimmed lower, brushing dangerously close to the ridges before pulling up sharply. "This is how you ride the terrain," he boasted. "Don't worry, Captain, stick close, and maybe you'll learn something." Ruiz's voice cut through with a hint of irritation. "Maintain discipline, Brenner. This isn't an airshow." "Copy, sir," Brenner replied, though the smirk was audible in his tone. Elena kept her breathing even, every adjustment to the cyclic deliberate. She had no intention of chasing Brenner's theatrics. Her Black Hawk moved with restrained elegance, every motion calculated. She logged the course mentally, noting potential landing zones, choke points, and lines of approach. Minutes stretched as the squadron pressed deeper into the valley. The chatter over the radios eased into routine check-ins. Sunlight painted the canyon walls gold, the shadows growing sharper as the terrain narrowed. From her seat, Elena tracked every flicker of movement below. A stray glint off stone caught her attention. She marked it quietly on her map, storing it away for later analysis. Her crew exchanged no jokes, no distractions. They matched her composure, sensing her seriousness. Where Brenner relied on bravado, Elena relied on vigilance. She knew better than to underestimate silence. Silence could hide anything. The valley stretched ahead, endless and uncertain. The flight was smooth, but Elena's instincts stayed sharp. Smooth never lasted forever. The canyon's calm was shattered in an instant. A sudden roar, sharp and violent, split the air as explosions erupted along the valley floor. Dust and debris shot skyward, and the once clear line of sight was obscured by smoke curling from jagged rocks. Elena's hands clenched the controls, muscles tightening as her instincts screamed that something had gone horribly wrong. "Incoming fire," a voice shouted over the comms. Chaos rippled through the squadron. Helicopters veered sharply, dodging flashes of gunfire, tracers streaking past like angry sparks. Elena's eyes scanned frantically, noting the positions of insurgents taking advantage of every ridge and crevice. Brenner's Black Hawk, attempting to perform one of his flashy maneuvers, didn't react fast enough. A hail of RPG fire slammed into the side of his chopper. The impact sent the craft into a violent spin, alarms blaring, lights flickering on the instrument panel. "Elena! Watch him," someone shouted, though voices were nearly lost in the roar of rotors and explosions. She watched in horror as Brenner's helicopter spiraled uncontrollably toward a steep ridge. His co-pilot struggled with the controls, but the momentum was too much. The chopper clipped the rocky slope with a screech of metal tearing against stone before coming to a jarring halt, flames licking the hull. Smoke coiled into the sky, black and thick. Elena's stomach tightened. The squadron was in disarray, and the general's convoy, below on the winding canyon road, was exposed. Vehicles skidded to a halt as insurgents poured fire from concealed positions, pinning the soldiers in a deadly crossfire. Soldiers dived for cover, returning fire where they could, but the numbers were stacked against them. Hold formation. Keep it tight. Ruiz barked over the comms, but even he struggled to maintain control in the chaos. The unexpected attack had shattered coordination. Elena's mind raced. She scanned the valley, tracing the source of the ambush. Hidden caves, boulder fields, and ridges offered the insurgents perfect vantage points. Each movement of her Black Hawk had to be precise, too slow, and she would become a target, too fast, and she risked losing control in the narrow canyon walls. The wind roared past her helmet as she banked sharply to avoid falling debris, eyes locked on Brenner's crippled craft. Sparks and smoke spiraled upward, the smell of burning fuel faintly reaching her through the cabin vents. She knew she had seconds to act before more lives were lost. On the ground, the general's convoy was pinned, engines revving futilely under the hail of fire. Soldiers scrambled behind armored vehicles, their shouts mingling with the crack of gunfire. The sense of urgency pressed on Elena like a physical weight. Every decision she made now could mean the difference between life and death. Her grip on the controls tightened, jaw set. The valley was a trap, the insurgents relentless, and the squadron teetered on the brink of disaster. But Elena's eyes remained focused, scanning, calculating, preparing to move where others feared. The roar of the canyon filled Elena's ears, mingling with the frantic crackle of comms and the distant explosions from the convoy below. Panic had begun to ripple through the squadron, and Ruiz's voice, usually steady, now wavered as he tried to coordinate the pilots. For a moment, hesitation threatened to freeze the entire mission. Elena, Ruiz's voice broke through, strained with uncertainty. I can't get everyone out safely, hold position. She cut him off firmly over the headset. I've got this, sir. Trust me. Stay on comms and guide the others, I'm taking point. The moment she spoke, a hush of focus settled over her crew. Elena's hands moved like extensions of thought, cyclic and collective pitch responding instantly to every nuance in the air. The Black Hawk dipped, rose, and banked with precise control as she guided it toward the most dangerous zone, the ridge where Brenner's disabled craft smoldered and the insurgents' fire raked the ground below. RPG tracers streaked past, exploding mere feet from the fuselage. Sparks splintered against the hull. Elena adjusted her trajectory, executing low-altitude evasive maneuvers she had only ever practiced in simulators, now tested under real fire. Each movement was calculated, too high, and she'd be an easy target, too low, and the rotors might catch jagged rock. Eyes forward, Hawkeye, Mara's voice reminded her, clipped and steady. The radio had become their lifeline, a channel of coordination amid chaos. Elena acknowledged silently, scanning the terrain for every potential threat, every crevice where enemy fighters might be hidden. Below, soldiers scrambled from vehicle to vehicle, pinned by concentrated fire. She hovered dangerously close, the skids mere inches from the jagged stone. The wind whipped violently, sending dust and debris into her cockpit, but her eyes remained fixed on the extraction zone. Prepare to winch, she ordered. Her crew reacted instantly, securing ropes and stretchers, readying themselves to pull the wounded aboard. Elena's Black Hawk shuddered as tracers grazed the fuselage, but she refused to falter, threading the aircraft with surgical precision. A soldier broke cover and ran toward her designated pickup point. Bullets kicked up dust at his feet. Elena adjusted, tilting the Black Hawk to shield him from the line of fire, hovering at an angle that kept both rotors safe from the rocky terrain and enemy fire. Ropes dropped. Soldiers grasped them and began ascending as Elena maintained a perfect hover, every second stretch taut by the threat surrounding them. The first wounded were lifted aboard, groaning but alive, and the relief in the cockpit was brief. Another wave of insurgent fire erupted. Next group ready. Elena called, voice calm, resonant with authority. Her movements didn't waver. Every twist, every turn of the cyclic was precise, controlled, and executed under pressure that would have frozen lesser pilots. Her crew stared in awe, realizing the calm, disciplined force they had once doubted was the only reason lives were being saved. Elena's eyes never left the terrain, calculating, adjusting, daring to keep the Black Hawk where no one else would. In that moment, she became more than a pilot. She became Hawkeye, the force threading chaos with steel and courage, taking command when all others hesitated. Smoke from Brenner's crashed Black Hawk curled into the canyon sky, mingling with the haze of gunfire and dust kicked up by insurgent movements. The valley had become a maelstrom of chaos, soldiers ducked behind shattered vehicles, while insurgents swarmed from concealed positions, their fire relentless and precise. Elena's eyes scanned every ridge and boulder as her Black Hawk cut through the smoky air. "Hold steady, Hawkeye," Mara's voice said, tight with tension, over the radio. "They're closing fast." Elena didn't respond verbally. There was no time. Every second mattered. She guided the helicopter through the narrow canyon with millimeter precision, skimming rock faces that seemed impossibly close. The blades whipped past jagged outcrops, sending shards of stone and dust spiraling into the air. One miscalculation would mean disaster, not just for her crew, but for the pinned soldiers below. Below, Brenner's helicopter had rolled partially onto its side, flames licking the metal edges. Smoke stung the eyes of the men scrambling across the rocky ground, and bullets pocked the canyon walls with sharp echoes. Brenner himself had been thrown clear but struggled to move, clutching a bleeding shoulder. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by shock and pain. "Elena, you're going to have to hover lower," Mara advised, her voice steady but urgent. "They're taking cover, but they can't hold out much longer." Elena adjusted, letting the Black Hawk drop lower, balancing on the fine line between safety and catastrophe. She could feel the wind resistance tugging at the fuselage, and the rotor blades skimmed dangerously close to the canyon edges. Her grip tightened on the cyclic, eyes scanning for every obstacle, every hostile position. "Ropes ready," she called to her crew. The rescue team sprang into action, preparing stretchers and harnesses with practiced urgency. Elena positioned the Black Hawk directly above Brenner and the surviving soldiers, maintaining a hover despite the violent turbulence of the canyon air. She lowered the ropes, metal clanging softly against the helicopter's frame. Soldiers and wounded alike grasped them, pulling themselves upward with desperate strength. Brenner hesitated, wincing as he grabbed the rope. Elena's gaze met his through the cockpit glass. For a fleeting moment, his eyes widened in stunned recognition. The man who had mocked her countless times now looked at her with something like awe, a silent acknowledgement of skill and bravery. "Move, Brenner," Mara urged. He gritted his teeth and climbed, each pull testing his injured body, until he reached the relative safety of the Black Hawk. One by one, the soldiers followed, the ropes swaying violently in the updraft created by the rotors. Elena adjusted constantly, small movements of the cyclic keeping the Black Hawk stable under fire. Bullets pinged off nearby rocks, tracer fire streaked past, yet she remained calm, controlled, every decision precise. There was no panic, only calculation, focus, and determination. Finally, the last soldier was aboard. Elena pulled back on the collective and rose carefully, weaving the helicopter away from the crash site. Smoke trailed beneath them, the sound of distant explosions punctuating the tense silence inside the cockpit. Brenner, bloodied and exhausted, sat in stunned silence, still absorbing the reality that the pilot he had mocked had just saved his life. The dust from the canyon still hung in the air as Elena steadied the Black Hawk, her body humming with tension from the previous rescue. She had just pulled Brenner and several soldiers to safety, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed the worst had passed. But then the call came over the comms, sharp and urgent. "Sir. General Harlow's convoy, vehicle hit. He's trapped." Ruiz's voice cracked with panic, each word clipped but heavy with fear. "We can't get to him. The enemy fire is too strong." Elena's pulse quickened. She tightened her grip on the controls, eyes narrowing. The general was not just a high-ranking officer, he was the one everyone depended on for leadership in the field. And now he was isolated, vulnerable, pinned behind enemy lines in the heart of the kill zone. "Send coordinates," she said into the radio, calm but decisive. Mara quickly relayed the location, providing a grid of the canyon road where the general's vehicle had come to a halt. Insurgents had formed a semicircle around it, their gunfire punctuating the smoke that had begun rising from scattered wreckage. Ruiz's voice came again, trembling. "Elena, wait. Orders, do not." "I'm going," she interrupted, cutting through the hesitation. No pause, no second guessing. She had faced fire before, maneuvered through chaos, saved lives. This was her moment. Hesitation wasn't an option. The Black Hawk tilted forward and surged toward the coordinates, the wind rushing past the cockpit like an electric current. Elena weaved through the canyon walls with surgical precision, every movement calculated, avoiding jagged outcrops and the unpredictable turbulence of the narrow gorge. Her crew's hands tightened on harnesses and equipment, trusting her implicitly. Bullets whined past, pinging off the fuselage. Tracer rounds streaked across the valley like angry sparks. Elena adjusted instantly, banking sharply and dipping low to minimize exposure. She traced a path between the ridges that left the insurgents momentarily blinded by shadow and terrain. Every second counted. Below, the general's vehicle lay immobilized. Soldiers crouched behind its armor, returning fire where they could, but they were vastly outnumbered. Harlow himself was pinned, leaning against the door of the vehicle, assessing the danger while trapped. The moment Elena saw him, her jaw tightened. There was no time to hesitate. "Prepare the ropes," she ordered. Mara and the crew scrambled to ready the extraction, tension and adrenaline coiling through their bodies. The Black Hawk hovered with millimeter precision, rotor wash kicking up dust and debris, creating a moving shield over the general's position. Elena's hands moved without pause, every adjustment keeping the helicopter stable despite the chaos surrounding them. Insurgents fired relentlessly, but she ignored the noise, focusing entirely on the trapped figure below. This was no longer a drill. Lives were at stake, and she would not fail. "Hold on, sir. We're coming," she shouted, determination cutting through the roar of the blades. The canyon opened briefly into a narrow clearing, just wide enough for a Black Hawk to fit. Elena's eyes locked on the space as the valley walls pressed close on either side. Dust and debris whipped violently around her rotor blades, kicked up by the chaotic winds of the canyon and the insurgent fire below. Every instinct told her this landing was borderline impossible, but there was no other choice. "Steady, steady," she muttered under her breath, guiding the helicopter with millimeter adjustments. The skids scraped over uneven ground as she lowered the aircraft into position, careful to avoid jagged rocks and hidden crevices. Mara and the crew readied ropes and stretchers, the tension in their movements palpable. From below, insurgents were advancing rapidly, emerging from the shadows of the ridges. Their gunfire stuttered across the clearing, bullets pinging off the fuselage, sending shards of metal and dust into the air. Elena's heart pounded, but her hands remained steady. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. "Sir, we've got ropes ready," Mara shouted, her voice strained over the comms. Elena nodded, eyes scanning the terrain for the safest approach. General Harlow was lying on the ground near the disabled vehicle, injured but conscious, his uniform torn and dust-streaked. Soldiers provided a weak shield, but they were far too few to hold back the insurgents for long. "Grab the ropes, sir." "Move," Elena commanded. Harlow's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the helicopter hovering so close. With careful guidance from Mara, he grasped the rope, wincing as his injuries made every movement painful. Elena maintained the Black Hawk's position, rotor wash whipping against the canyon walls and creating a turbulent, spinning shield that forced the insurgents back, if only slightly. The general was pulled aboard, one arm over a crewman's shoulder, every motion tense and precise. Elena's Black Hawk shuddered under the strain, but she held it steady, adjusting cyclic and collective continuously to counter the shifting weight. Soldiers and aides scrambled aboard behind Harlow, breathless but alive. As the last man climbed in, Elena knew she had to get them out, and fast. She pulled back on the collective, rising rapidly through the narrow canyon while banking sharply. The insurgents fired relentlessly, but she threaded the Black Hawk through the jagged walls with a daring precision few could imagine. Then came the final maneuver. Elena initiated an inverted pull-up, twisting the helicopter in a controlled climb over the ridge. The rotors screamed against the wind, scraping perilously close to rocks, but the aircraft obeyed her will completely. Every second stretched as gravity fought her, yet she completed the maneuver flawlessly. Once over the ridge, the valley fell behind them, chaos replaced by open sky. Elena leveled the Black Hawk, breathing steadily but fully aware of the gravity of what had just occurred. Her crew exhaled in unison, awe and relief etched across their faces. Harlow, seated and still recovering, looked at her with gratitude and respect that transcended words. The moment would not be forgotten. Every pilot, every soldier, and eventually, the story of that impossible extraction would etch Elena Varga into legend. The hum of the Black Hawk's rotors faded as Elena guided it onto the tarmac, skids touching down with careful precision. Dust and exhaust swirled around the helicopter, settling slowly as the engines wound down. The hangar beyond was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of Red Serpent Valley. Soldiers and crew paused mid-task, eyes drawn to the figure stepping from the cockpit, helmet tucked under her arm, uniform streaked with dust and grime. Elena moved with calm purpose, each step measured. She didn't look around, didn't expect acknowledgement. She had done what needed to be done, and recognition, while welcome, was secondary. Still, the silence was different this time, not mocking, not dismissive. It carried weight, a mixture of awe and respect. General Harlow emerged from the group of officers, his face usually stoic, unreadable. Today, though, his gaze was fixed on Elena. He halted a few paces from her and raised his hand in a salute, a gesture he reserved only for those who had earned it through exceptional courage. Elena returned the salute, firm and precise, their eyes meeting briefly in understanding. It was acknowledgement without words, the highest form of respect she could receive. The hangar remained quiet, save for the low murmur of relieved crews and the occasional clatter of equipment. Elena moved toward the maintenance bay, still processing the adrenaline and intensity of the extraction. Behind her, Brenner approached slowly, his usual arrogance replaced by an uneasy humility. Blood still stained his uniform, and his shoulder bore the marks of the firefight, but it was his expression that told the story. "She saved my life," he muttered, voice low, almost reverent. Those words carried weight, not just for the man who had mocked her for months, but for everyone who had doubted her skills. Elena didn't respond, a small nod was enough. The sentiment was understood without ceremony. Whispers spread quickly across the base. Hawkeye, some murmured, a nickname that captured the precision, vigilance, and courage Elena had displayed. Hawkeye, the one who proved them all wrong. The words traveled from squadron to squadron, growing with each retelling of the impossible maneuvers, the daring extractions, and the fearless flight through a hail of enemy fire. Lieutenant Mara Steele caught up to Elena, offering a small smile. "Told you," she said quietly, voice carrying only to Elena. "You'd get your moment. And now, well, they'll never doubt you again." Elena allowed herself a faint smile, a rare release of tension. Her hands were still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, but the moment of recognition settled over her like a quiet exhale. She had faced every doubt, every whisper, every mockery, and emerged not only alive but triumphant. The hangar, once filled with skepticism and quiet derision, now buzzed with admiration. Soldiers lingered to watch her, officers exchanged nods, and even Brenner stood back, silent, humbled. Elena knew the battlefield had changed her in ways beyond skill. The moment had forged her reputation, sealed her respect, and earned her a name that would echo through the base for years to come. And as she looked at the Black Hawk one last time, the nickname lingering in the air, she knew this was only the beginning of her legacy.